Hello everyone, welcome back to the series on stroke. If you have not already watched the first video of this series, I would request you to watch that first and then come to this, because this is going to be its continuation. Now in this video, let's try to understand the further course of management of an ischemic stroke patient and also touch upon hemorrhagic stroke. About the last video, a lot of people asked me as to why I spoke so fast. The reason is that I wanted to give you maximum information in minimum time possible. I'll try to do that in this video also. In the last video, we already discussed about the importance of taking an ischemic stroke patient to an appropriate hospital in time so that the treatment can begin within 4.5 hours and patient may have reversal of his weakness. Now in case if it fails to be done for whatever reason, let's try to understand the further course of management. The patient will have paralysis of the body part corresponding to the area of the brain damaged because of reduced blood supply. From this point on, a few things needs to be taken care of. One of the important thing being protecting the patient from getting a fit by giving him appropriate medications. Understand this concept here. Brain is well protected inside the skull. Skull is a bone. Hence it's a closed limited space inside. The space inside will not increase for any reason. If anything extra gets added there will be a lot of pressure on the structures which are normally present. That is brain. Now let me try to explain this by giving you a simple example. Imagine 4 people inside a small closed room. Now if by any chance a fifth person gets added there, or if one of the 4 persons starts becoming fat, then the others will have a problem, right? Similarly, if anything extra gets added there, then there will be severe shortage of space for the brain, which can be dangerous to the patient's life. Now why does this happen? As you already know, if any of your body part gets damaged, it may be hand, leg, finger, it swells, right? Similarly, as the brain gets damaged because of lack of blood supply, swelling starts appearing in the damaged brain. Now the amount of swelling may vary from patient to patient. Some patients may not have any significant swelling, while the others may have massive swelling. Now this is like the 4th person starts becoming fat rapidly inside the room. The others will have severe shortage of space. Similar thing happens in the brain. Now there will be a lot of pressure on the most important part of the brain called as brain stem, about which I already discussed in the last video. We try to control this swelling by giving appropriate medications. But if and when this swelling goes beyond certain limit, then an operative procedure will have to be undertaken called as decompressive craniectomy. This is done by a neurosurgeon. In this, what we do is we remove a part of the skull to provide some space for the swelling brain. If I were to compare this to our ongoing example, then it is like the 4th person becomes tremendously fat and the 1st person, who was the most important person, now gets suffocated. Now what happens? A brain surgeon or a neurosurgeon comes and breaks open one of the wall so that the 4th person can slightly move out and all of them can stand there comfortably. A very important thing to note here is that the neurosurgeon breaking the wall will only create some space for the 4th person to stand, but it will not make the fat person thin again. Similarly, when a decompressive craniectomy is done by a neurosurgeon, it will only create some space for the swelling brain and hence prevent further deterioration and may even prevent death. But it will not reverse the damage to the brain that has already happened. Hence, it will not reverse the weakness that has already happened. However, some amount of recovery may happen with time as a result of the adjacent less affected parts of the brain compensating for the action and with good physiotherapy and rehabilitation. But surgery has no role in it, except for the obvious role that the recovery is possible only when the patient is alive, which may require an operative procedure. I hope these things are clear to you about ischemic stroke. If you have any queries, feel free to ask me in the comment section. Now let's discuss about another type of stroke, that is hemorrhagic stroke, which accounts for about 20% of the stroke. Now most of the time this hemorrhagic stroke or the bleeding happens because of hypertension or high blood pressure. Now there is another thing called as rupture of the aneurysm, which causes something called as subarachnoid hemorrhage. Sometimes even this is considered under stroke, but let's discuss this entire topic in detail in some other video later. The most common site of anterior circulation hemorrhagic stroke is what is called as basal ganglia. Because of the bleed, the nerve fibers carrying signals from the brain to one of the sites of the body gets interrupted. As a result, the patient becomes paralyzed. Now, if the size of the bleed is large enough or if the amount of swelling around the bleed is too much, then as explained earlier, we will have to undertake an operative procedure and remove all the collected blood so that the patient does not deteriorate further or so that the patient does not end up dying. I hope you understood this basic difference between ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. Now, both these patients require a long-term, very good quality physiotherapy and rehabilitation therapy so that their quality of life may be improved. In the next video, we shall discuss about the most important aspect of stroke, that is stroke prevention. What all measures you can take so that you and your dear one can stay safe from this morbid disease. So, I hope you liked today's video. If so, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family. And for more health and wellness related videos, kindly subscribe to this channel. Thank you.